Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fifth Stage podcast. How's it going? I'm Kyle Armstrong. This is
Ben.
Ben Harmon here. And usually we have Emma, but she just stormed out of the room, angry. I have to
Radio
adjust this
drama.
audio. Is your headphones super
It
loud?
sounds kind of loud, yeah.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's normal.
Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Emma's actually not here. She's away. So it's just Ben and I doing an episode.
Just boys' night.
Yes. So how's it going?
It's going pretty good. I'm excited for today's topic.
Yes, I'm excited too. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about the philosophy of philosophy, if you will. A little meta episode.
Get to real fundamentals about the other things we've been talking about.
Yeah, so this episode's all about like the importance of philosophy and the need for philosophy in society. Because I think that's very important. And I know, like, I don't know if you've heard this, Ben, even though I do know you've heard this. But I've heard, like, people are like, why do you talk about, like, philosophy so much? Like, it doesn't matter. I'm like, no, you don't understand.
That's the only thing that really does matter.
Yeah.
We'd say so.
So we're going to dig into that today. So let's start out talking about what do you think life would look like without philosophy?
Is that a question to me?
Yeah.
Without philosophy, isn't philosophy what separates us from the beasts of the earth? I don't think it's possible to be like a conscious being, you know, whatever that means to you, and not have philosophy. Like that's how you know you are conscious.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I was reading some things earlier about, like, to prep for the episode, and I was like, what would life look like without philosophy? And it's just like, I don't know, unconscious, like animals. You know?
Drones walking around.
Yeah, because philosophy is like a sense of self and like how your, I don't know, perception of self interacts with the world around you. At least that's how I would define it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into, I mean, I guess that's pretty much answers the question there about what is philosophy or life without philosophy. So let's get into like what actually is philosophy, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's, according to this website, which I'm going to do a quick shout out because I think it's really good. And if you're interested in this or want to check it out later, it's importanceofphilosophy.com. And it goes into the 5 main branches of philosophy and like their main components and why they matter and all that. So let's talk about the first one. We got metaphysics, which is the study of existence.
I would say this is when most people hear philosophy, this is like the kind of philosophy they think about, like real, like abstract thought about what it is to like live and think.
Yeah, what it is to exist, like, I don't know, that's pretty abstract. And there's no way to like prove any of that, right? So
some might call it the least like useful philosophy for like everyday life. But we all exist, right?
Yeah, we all exist. You might as well, I don't know, put some thought into it, right?
Come up with your own idea of like why you think things exist.
Yeah, it's always good to do. Next up, we have epistemology, which is the study of acquiring knowledge and the process of acquiring knowledge. I think this is probably the one people are least familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go. I'll read from the website right now. So epistemology is an explanation of how we think, and it's required in order to determine true from false. So, like, how are we deciding, like, fact from fiction, pretty much?
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess, on a nature level, like, ants don't need to know what's true or false. They just need to know, like, how to find food or whatever. But we need to, like, deal with those kinds of things.
Right. Since we decided to care about.
Yeah, since we've decided that we exist with metaphysics, now we need to decide like how we're going to interact with things.
And how we know if we exist, how we determine things that maybe don't exist.
Yes, exactly. Next up, this one's pretty important, ethics, which is the study of morals and how we like determine what is good and bad for ourselves, pretty much. And that pretty much goes along with epistemology, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Also very important. And you need to like form a sense of morals, right?
Right. To like know what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, what the like function. Next up is politics.
Whoa, hold on,
Oh,
Kyle.
I'm sorry.
You're saying politics
I am.
is philosophy?
I am saying politics is philosophy.
Wow. People might not consider that, at first glance.
That's definitely one where you're like, oh yeah, I'm a political science major or something. And you're like, that's not philosophy. That's pretty far from philosophy. But I'd say it definitely. The definition on this website, which I'd agree with, is ethics applied to groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
So how's the best way to ethically and like I don't know treat a group of people?
Like organize and like
and
govern a
that's
group
definitely
of
a
people.
philosophical thing, 'cause
Right.
There's no clearly defined right or wrong answer for politics.
Right. It might seem like obvious to us that like, a government should like, treat its people fairly or safely or things like that. But I would just say that's because most governments now have pretty similar ethics. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And like human rights. But, that probably wasn't always the case.
Yeah, back in the day, like kings just had all the power, and
Right.
like there's nothing you could do about it. So we've kind of evolved as a society to believe like politics should care more about the people, which I'd agree with. I know most people probably would, but that wasn't always the case, right? And so politics is like this continually evolving philosophical thing. And that's what like the French Revolution was all about, right?
Right. Any revolution, really.
Yeah, any revolution is a philosophical revolution, hopefully.
Hopefully. I mean, yeah, God, I hope so.
Unless you're just revolting just to revolt.
Just to be a counter.
Yeah, that's not very productive. And then the last one we have is ethics or aesthetics, the study of art.
Art.
That one's one people wouldn't think of probably as well. But it's kind of the study of art and how we derive meaning from it. For example, is art music and painting, or is a sunset art? Is a cool computer program art? you know,
where do you draw that,
Yeah.
that line?
Do you want to get into that one? I think that one's a good talking
We
point.
could. That could probably be like a whole nother conversation, but we can talk about it a little bit.
I'd say, like, personally, I'd say art would be anything made by a human, like, out of understanding, rational understanding.
Okay. I once heard like a very broad definition of art as anything someone does not for survival, like physical survival. And that's really broad, but it could be true.
It encompasses a lot.
Yeah. Anything you want to do. I mean, you could even say like that's anything you do with like intent.
Yeah, definitely. And that comes back to, what is it, metaphysics, right? You have to know that you exist to have intent, I would say.
Correct.
So art relies innately on metaphysics. And that.
These all kind of rely on the belief that you think you exist in like some individual sense.
You see yourself as separate from the universe.
Right.
But that's how I would define consciousness, at least. But yeah, these are all like pretty cool. And I think we could honestly do a whole episode about each one of these. But what do you think, just right off the bat, opinion question, what do you think is the most important one? Metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, or aesthetics?
I would say right off the bat, if I'm valuing it off like which one I think can reveal like the most about our like human condition or just like being conscious.
Yeah, you can define like what you think means the best means.
I would say metaphysics, or at least that's the one that like interests me the most because it is so like abstract and removed from like physical reality.
Yeah, and it really sets the stage for the rest of them.
That's kind of like the first question that you always have to like consider, I would say.
As Camus said.
Yeah.
The only question. Yeah. Albert Camus, or is it Albert?
He's French.
I think it's whatever. It's Camus.
It's Camus, yeah.
But he's a French philosopher. Great guy. He died tragically at a young age, but he was very smart and had some cool books. Check him out if you want to. But But yeah, I'd say metaphysics is definitely the one that like has the biggest implications, at least on the personal level. But politics is one that I'm pretty interested in, just because like that has the biggest impact on people as a whole.
I'd agree with that too. Yeah, metaphysics is like the most important one individually, but politics is probably definitely the one that has the biggest impact on the most people.
And that's just really a matter of how do you define best with these abstract things.
See, yeah, that whole question, that'd be like an ethics question.
Yes. See, politics or philosophy's all around you. It's everywhere.
It is.
So yeah, speaking of that, philosophy all around you, let's get into America and how America, at least the society we live in, is kind of like devoid of a lot of philosophy. Like I was saying earlier, like I've heard people and they're like, hey, like, why do you even care about this?
Yeah.
And I think that's a weird question because I don't know, why wouldn't you like want to contemplate your own existence?
When people say like, oh, like I don't like to think about those kind of things, or like why even talk about that, like it doesn't matter, it makes me wonder like what they like say matters, right? Or what they think is worth talking about. Money or like I guess more like immediate things, you know, even though I think these can have immediate impacts on you too, like mentally. But yeah, I would agree. And you know, the fact that they're even saying like, oh, that doesn't matter to talk about, that's a valued statement. That's straight philosophy, man. Let me tell you. They just don't want to hear other philosophies. I'm putting the whole system on blast.
All right, let's get into that. That was one of the things that really made me want to talk about this today. Was I was reading an article about the lack of philosophy in America's school systems, and one of the quotes in this, I know I had you read the article, so you've seen it, but one of the quotes was, the philosophy gives you the ability to entertain an idea without accepting it.
I really like that idea.
I think that was Aristotle's
I think
quote.
so, yeah.
And man, what a guy.
Yeah, he lived thousands of years ago, but
And he was already thinking about that.
yeah, what a relatable idea.
But yeah, I definitely think like that's something that America is lacking right now. The ability to like be like, hey, you know, like I don't have to agree with your idea, but I can at least like think it through and think the implications and then decide for myself.
I would agree. It seems like that's at an all-time low. And in my opinion, I'd say like in the past, America's been like a very philosophical country. I mean, it was
founded on philosophy,
but basically by like political philosophers, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like all the theories of like John Locke and Thomas Jefferson was like writing the
rationalism.
Declaration. Yeah, I mean, America started off as this like fundamentally like, yeah, we're gonna change things. We're gonna be like this.
Yeah,
philosophical
and
country.
Like the whole way our government is set up with like federalism, with like the states level separated from the federal level, is like
political philosophy,
right? And so the states could like do their own things, and like whatever like came out of that could like be applied at the federal level, and that's like a philosophical like experiment, like on a really big scale.
Yeah,
you know,
it's working out, I guess.
Yeah,
well, I mean, we're still here 200 some years later.
That's not that long though.
I know the Romans.
Yeah,
they knew how to do it. But let's get into this. I was thinking, like, I know I've talked to you about this before, but let's do it on air. We'll do it live. If I was like suddenly made like the emperor of the world or something like that, I would try and like one of the first things I would do is make philosophy a mandatory course in high school, or I don't know, even younger. But I'd want it to be like the core of the education system, because I think you can really use philosophy to branch off to all subjects, right? Like you need philosophy to examine biology. You need philosophy to like look at accounting, even. You know?
Yeah, I would say all sciences, which that includes things like accounting, finance, pretty much like any,
even art too.
Right,
like
any,
art is a philosophical thing.
Any like system of thought has to be like founded in philosophy, because philosophy tells us like the whole scientific method determines like how to study things. That's like a philosophical idea. It's not like we see this in nature anywhere.
Yeah,
we kind of just like created.
We came up with that,
right? And you can even look like PhDs. You know what that stands for? People, Doctor of Philosophy. You know,
and we're laying out the knowledge.
Yeah, any like doctor, even if they're like a medical doctor or like an engineer, they're like a PhD, you know. So that's like a vestige of the past when maybe philosophy was viewed more universally.
The Greeks, they really liked philosophy.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we've talked about this, but let's say, like, how would you implement that into the school system?
What would it like look like exactly?
Yeah, because I know I could always, or like anticipate, or already anticipate. I can always anticipate. No, I'm not saying that. I could already anticipate like a counter argument being like, why would you want to do that? Like, then you're just feeding people like dogma, you know? Like, you can't teach philosophy. It's something people have to like learn from themselves, right?
Right. But you can expose them to it, which I think a lot of people aren't. And if they are, they most of the time that's like through their own action, which is great. But if more people could like be presented with these philosophical thoughts that they can then choose from.
Yeah, I think one of the ways, or at least the first way I was exposed to philosophy was through English class and reading books.
Yeah.
Because books are like, you know, that's just philosophy, like some personal philosophy wrapped in a story. Like, so you don't see the philosophy.
Right, hopefully. I mean, most good books.
I'd say the best books are ones that like reach some philosophical truth that you can like relate to. Because otherwise it's just, you know, a story.
With no deeper meaning.
Yeah, where you're just like, well, that was, like, it can still be good, but it won't, like, last because things can change, right? So I think the best way to implement it would probably be to start out each, like, class by, like, learning the philosophy of that. Like, for example, in science and how you're saying, like, the scientific method, you could learn like why or like why that's considered the way to do things now instead of just being told this is how it is.
Yeah, don't even like worry about thinking about it. Just like know it is.
Yeah, because I think that's one of the biggest problems is like we're told, oh, this is, you know, the way it is, and you're never told like to question it.
Right. And I think that like breeds like disinterest and like apathy. If you're just told like accept it, don't think about it, you'll never like really embrace it like as your own. You'll just be like, it's not even worth thinking about.
Yeah. Not saying you can't be like interested in science without that, but it's easier to be like, oh yeah, like I can actually, you know, participate in this.
It seems like
it becomes more personal.
Yeah, less arbitrary.
So I definitely would argue for teaching philosophy in that way. And let's look at like one of the big things that philosophy does to help school systems or like individuals even. So philosophy teaches you to like entertain an idea without accepting it. I think that's one of the biggest points that I wanted to stress on this episode is that like just because you disagree with someone, it doesn't mean you have to like hate them, right?
I would definitely agree with that. I would say hating someone for their ideas alone is never the best solution.
I'd
the
say
best
that's almost like counter to democracy.
I would agree. I mean, I don't want to get into like is it ever is it ever okay to hate anyone for anything? But I think like you should never be afraid of an idea alone.
Yeah. Because if you're afraid of an idea, doesn't that mean you're insecure about your own belief?
I would say so, even if you don't realize it.
Yeah. So I think philosophy gives you like the power to be more secure in yourself, right? Just so, and if you like, I think one of the main things people are afraid of is like being corrupted by some other philosophy, right? Especially like you see this a lot in religion. I'm not gonna like get into most of that, but like creation scientists who are like, oh, we need to like teach this theory in schools because they're afraid that like if they don't, then they're like being corrupted by the other type of learning.
And in that case, I would say like if a student heard like creationist or like evolution, if you want to say that's like the counter argument, whichever one they come to, you know, on their own, hopefully they're being like presented both equally, like as valid. Whichever one they come to is the one they like actually agree with more. And would you rather have people just agreeing with your viewpoint because they've never heard anything different, or people who actually like believe it because they've chosen it? I would say the later, even if that ends up with you having like less people following your viewpoint, but at least it'll be true.
More like, yeah. they'll be more passionate
Yeah.
about it.
If you have to like hide someone from other ideas to make sure they keep your own, that's not good.
Yeah, that's. I don't even know what that is. That's like 1984 status. But yeah, definitely like someone else's ideas aren't going to like corrupt yours, right? And if like you start agreeing with someone else's, is that a bad thing? Like
I'd
that
say
just
that's,
means that you're
yeah.
like growing as a person. I'd
Yeah,
say.
I would say that meant like you may have believed something different before, but that was just because you didn't have more information. And now that you do, you're actually like following like your character or like the essence of what you care about even more.
Yeah. Cool. Good stuff. Next benefit of philosophy, if you will. It prepares you for like difficult situations, right? So a lot of traditional philosophy, like religion, answers questions like, where do you go when you die? You know, that's a really big question that we aren't really taught to think about in school. You know, it's just kind of like, yep, that's going to happen, but like, don't think about it now. You're young. You can still like conquer the world.
Yeah.
At least that's how my school was. I don't know. You went to a Catholic school.
It's true. I went to a Catholic school, and I would say they were definitely like, it didn't feel like dogmatic in that situation. More, it was like pretty like relaxed. And
That's
let me tell you, if you ever want to meet some pretty like non-religious people, go to a Catholic school, because there are for sure people who have sincere religious beliefs, but there's also people who, because they like learn so much about this religion, they can come to the conclusion that I know this religion very well, so I know I don't like agree with it for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm of the mind that like you can't force someone into a philosophy. They have to come to it on their own.
For it to be true.
Well, yeah, for them to like be happy with it, I guess. And so a lot of like the whole idea of a Catholic school where you're only I don't know, like the traditional Catholic school where you're just presenting that philosophy and like trying to force it on people. I'd say that's like a surefire way to make them like rebel against it, you know?
Right.
Because that's all they can rebel against.
Right, yeah. They don't even feel the freedom to choose it if they would want to, because it's not even like presented as a choice.
Yeah. So like they could either accept it or rebel against it. And, you know, as soon as one person rebels, then that idea spreads and you get a counterculture going. And that's never, well, I mean, sometimes it's good, but.
So would you say there's any difference at like the most basic level between a religion and a philosophy? What is the difference?
Man, I've been trying to dissect this question for a while. And I think I came to a good enough conclusion, but I was thinking like, why would I feel weird about like having Eastern philosophy beliefs? Because I say Eastern philosophy instead of Eastern religion, like Buddhism or something, because I don't think it's a religion. I just think it's a way to think about things, right? And I think the difference between a religion and a philosophy is just that one is trying to be forced on you, whereas a philosophy is, I don't know, just a conversation, you know? Ideally, philosophy would be like in a Socratic seminar, I'd say, where you're just kind of like throwing out ideas and people are like, hey, what about this? And instead of like, here's the idea, you get to accept it.
So you'd say the difference is in a religion compared to a philosophy, the religion has set beliefs and like a control structure.
Yeah.
Right. Where ideally a philosophy, no one like owns that philosophy or like is like
Yeah, it's just part of
the final word on
universe.
that belief. Yeah. I get
'cause-
that. So do you think all religions at one point start out as a philosophy and then become a religion?
Yeah, I do. I think most religious leaders were probably just like philosophers or, you know, they tried to seek out some truth in the world and were like, hey, like, here's what I think about it. And then maybe it got blown way out of proportion. And, you know, you see this happen all the time in history.
I'd agree with that too.
That's good. Come to consensus. That's what I'm all about. After that short tangent on religion, I don't know. Do you think religion? Let's keep on this for a little bit.
Okay.
Do you think religion is good for answering like those tough questions about like what happens after you die and like I don't know, who am I even, like those kind of questions, or should you explore other alternatives for that?
I think it's possible to have a religion where, like, even the beliefs that the religion holds to be true can still be debated, like, openly and freely by people within that religion. I think that's, like, maybe not the norm, because that's, like, hard to do. And I think a lot of people in religions, like, don't really want to do that. They don't want to debate. They just feel it's true for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. But, and I'm no expert on this, but
yeah, we're not experts by any means.
I went to Catholic school, but that's about it. I've often heard this, that the Jewish faith, they're like one of their core things they value is like debate and like criticism of their own religion, like from within, and like continual like examination of their beliefs and like if they hold up today like they did maybe in the past. And I think that's definitely a positive trait.
Yeah, that's definitely something to be encouraged.
Right.
I think it's another interesting like practice like that is in the Amish community where I think when the children turn 18, they get a chance to like go and see the real world. Mm-hmm. And I forget what that year's called, but they get a year to go, and then they get to come back and choose if they want to leave or stay.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool because you're not like forcing it on it.
Right.
And I guess ideally that's what you're supposed to be doing with confirmation, right?
Right. It is like their choice. And I don't think many people today like are forced to follow a certain religion, but maybe like pressured or like not given.
Yeah.
They're not forced to, but like the conversation of if they wouldn't want to follow this religion like isn't ever brought up. So maybe they feel they're forced to.
Find it too uncomfortable to bring up. Mm-hmm. So they're like, well, it's easier to just do it.
Right. Even if I don't actually like know the beliefs or like hold them to be that true. Yeah. I always think it's interesting with Roman Catholic, which I know a lot about, and I have people in my life who are Catholic, mm-hmm. and I don't know if I would identify as Catholic or not, because it's also interesting because religions can have a big like cultural component that maybe you can separate from like the actual beliefs, Mm-hmm. That's like a whole different conversation though. But I know a lot of people who would definitely say they are Catholic, but then they have beliefs that like don't align with like what the Catholic Church might think, like whether that's like to like abortion or homosexuality, but they feel they don't see like that as any like cause for concern or like issue, which I'd say is positive because I feel like it probably wasn't like that in the past, where even if you didn't agree with everything, like you wouldn't feel comfortable saying that. Mm-hmm. But then it's like, do they actually believe in this religion?
They say they do. And that's all you can like.
Yeah. Every person who follows a religion has a different idea of what their religion is.
Yeah.
It's become so personal.
Mm-hmm. That actually gets into a point I wanted to talk about, how philosophy is like innately human. And if you go to the definition of philosophy, one of the myriad of definitions, I'll find it here really quick. So it's a study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline. And the key part there I want to highlight is "and existence," because if you're aware of your existence and you care about that, then philosophy applies to you, like just automatically. So in that sense, like it's intrinsic to your nature, and so it's good to think about it and I don't know, put some thought into it. Because otherwise, if it's already intrinsic to your nature and you're not thinking about it, you're susceptible to like picking up other people's philosophies that they push on you, right?
Right. And who would want that?
Well, then you're no longer in control of yourself,
right?
Right. At least that's what I would say.
It's interesting because I would say in America, it does seem like people don't really consider philosophy or have like a huge value placed on it, like in their own lives.
Yeah.
But I'd say Americans are definitely very opinionated people, right? So they have these
Well,
very
we've seen that in the last election.
right. They have these very strong beliefs. But I guess that's not
And no real way to talk about it.
right.
That's
Yeah,
the thing.
Beliefs alone isn't philosophy. It's like the discussion of those,
Yeah.
which might be
That is
lacking.
interesting, actually. I saw something online the other day where it was a breakdown of percent of students who graduated with philosophy degrees from colleges. I don't think any state had above 5%, and it was like around 1 to 2%.
I believe that.
Yeah, I think Montana was the highest with like 5%.
That's interesting.
Well, there's less students there. Less people go to Montana, so I could see more like philosophy students being there.
Yeah.
I don't know, but like just right off the bat, if only 1 to 2% of the population is thinking like, "Hey, philosophy's worth my time," and I'm not saying like go out and major in philosophy, but
yeah.
like you can. I do it on my own like spare time, right?
Right,
Just think
right.
about it. So, but I thought that was interesting that there's only like 1% of the 1 to 2% of the American public, educated American public, that's like shown an outward like motivation to study philosophy.
Do you
And I'm
think-
sure that's higher, but
Do you think our generation? This is so hard to like measure, and we're totally biased.
we'll get the stats guy. on that again.
Do you think our generation might, in general, be more or less interested in like the idea of philosophy or like other philosophies than maybe
Yeah,
like past generations?
I think this is out there. Not really, but we'll say it is. I think philosophy, like, or the interest in it, only comes about when like your sense of self is being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
And our sense, like our generation, we like look and see, you know, Washington that can't even like. It's not even normal for Washington to like stay open. It's always like, are they going to get the money to like stay open?
Yeah.
We look and see that. Whereas like our parents grew up and they were like in the golden age of America, where it's like we're building a college every week.
Yeah.
we're getting people out on the like off the streets.
Right, and
So it was more natural for them to just be like, yeah, things are great. Like, why wouldn't I accept the things?
Yeah.
Right?
right when things are great, why ever worry about or why ever think about why things are?
Yeah.
Because it's easier not to. But I would say things only ever get great.
When you think about it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Like that greatness is built upon the backs of people who had philosophical thoughts,
Exactly.
but people forget.
People forget so fast.
It's very fast, yeah.
So fast. And it's not our fault. Like, as humans, we're like hardwired to like want like we're only satisfied by what we can't have, right? Like, and that's an evolutionary thing. Like back in the past, we were only satisfied like, oh, we need shelter, and once you get shelter, it's like, well, I have it, but I could do better.
Yeah, I could
Right?
have more or safer.
Yeah, safer. And it's like it's a survival strategy to like always seek something, and once you have it, you don't really get much happiness from it, but the idea of it is what like really gives you happiness.
For in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the chase, not the
Yeah.
not the
Well,
reward.
and so like I don't know, like before you had shelter, you're like, man, if I had shelter, I'd be so happy.
I
And then you
wouldn't
get
want anything. And maybe for like that original generation, like once they do get that, they are happy. But if they have children who that's the norm for them, that won't bring them any like fulfillment.
yeah, and that's why I think it would be important to like put that into the school system, just to ensure like that people still think about it, even in the good times, because hopefully we have good times, right? Hopefully that happens. And then you want to ensure that it doesn't like something like this doesn't happen again, where like in the past everyone was like, yeah, it's great, we don't need to think about things. And then it gets to a state where people can't even bring up the subject of
Right.
politics without
Right.
like screams.
Or they like forget like how to maintain that or like how it even like how that greatness even happened. Because like you said, like will the good times always last like without interruption? Probably not. But I think the more you think about them even while you're like in the good times, that can make the fall less hard and like shorter. And I think that has been happening generally if you like look at human history as a whole.
Yeah. I think
Hopefully.
even I don't know if I've told you this, but I'm like really interested in biology and how biology applies to philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at like in times of extreme hardship in biology, like for example a famine, you get more mutant alleles in the DNA,
Right.
just because more variation means like there's a chance that more stuff will happen. And so like in the good times, it's like, well, we don't need to worry about getting those because this works and we're fine. And I think that's how it is in like society too, where like once you have a good time, it's like, yeah, well, we'll just keep doing the same thing. And then like eventually you're going to run into, I don't know, some political crisis. And then you need to start getting more like fresh blood into the system.
I would agree. Comfort creates like stagnant thought.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
Philosophy. Did the ancient Greeks have it right? That's the question.
But wasn't their level of comfort to care about philosophy, wasn't that built on the backs of slaves, Kyle?
Yeah. We'll need to see 2049, Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
So.
Anyone out there? We hear amazing things.
I don't know how, but this movie's getting the best ratings ever.
I'll be honest. I saw the trailers and I thought it looked very bad, but I was wrong, apparently.
We agreed on that. I was like, this looks like they totally missed the point.
Yeah.
But man, it's getting the best reviews ever.
Apparently we missed the point.
I don't even know, but yeah. I think like the ancient Greeks' emphasis on philosophy, maybe that was a little too much, but because they were so preoccupied with philosophy that they couldn't even defend their borders from the Romans.
But should people care about that though? You know, who knows?
They were just like, man, the Romans, they'll need our philosophy later.
Yeah, they'll accept it.
We'll live on in words.
And they were kind of right
They
in
are.
that sense. I would say, I mean, all of Western societies built on those philosophers.
Totally based on Western or Greek philosophy.
And their names are like still remembered. Mm-hmm. Even by people who don't know any their philosophies. They'll be like,
everyone
Aristotle,
knows
Plato, Socrates. People know them.
Man. So how do you think would you most effectively use philosophy?
In like personal life?
Yeah, just in general, like, so we're teaching kids philosophy now, but how would you want them to use it most effectively? Because I don't think it should be like, oh, I'm constantly thinking about the future and like esoteric thoughts. Like, eventually you're going to need to like stop. And
Right. Yeah, I don't think it has to be something that in any way like impedes like your normal life. I put air quotes around normal life. But I think it's more just like a side like compliment, you know, to where it'll just give you a new frame of reference to like view your own life and the life of like people around you, hopefully with more meaning.
Yeah. I would say if I was like a philosophy teacher, which everyone can be, but I'd say it should act as like a guiding light kind of. And so it's not like the one thing that you're focused towards, but you use it as a way to like move on in the future.
And to like
and use it as a tool, right?
To like, I guess, kind of like evaluate like your own actions, right? Because it can be easy for anyone to get caught up in whatever they're doing and like kind of disregard like why or if they actually want to, you know. But if you have a well-defined philosophy, which doesn't have to come from anyone else, it can be totally your own, just like influenced by other ideas.
Well, let's get into that after, but
okay. Then you can like take a step back and be like, wait, do I want to do this? Like, does my personal philosophy agree with this? And if it doesn't, you'll know. But in a lot of cases, people don't have that like model to like examine their actions with. And that leads to a lot of like frustration and confusion.
Yeah, if you don't have any like way to like gauge intrinsic personal progress, right? I don't know if you could ever find happiness.
You'll always be like lost.
Yeah, you'll never like no matter what you do, you'll never be happy unless it's like just the fleeting happiness that whatever it is affords you. Let me ask this really quick. So we were talking about like one of the main criticisms of like teaching philosophy would probably be like people are, oh, you're just going to teach them whatever you want to believe, right? Mm-hmm. Can you have anything that like arises independently, completely like a thought that's completely independent? Because I'd say that would be a good counter argument to that.
Completely. I would say with the way humans exist currently and the way our minds seem to work, I'd say no. A thought is always in reference to something else. But I would say that like being taught something that can create thoughts that like run counter to what you've been taught, for sure. We kind of talked about that before with people in Catholic schools, maybe that leading them to like reject Catholicism even more than like if they weren't taught it.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Like, what even is a completely independent thought, right?
Right. It's every idea is like iterative. I would say it's like built upon like others. Mm-hmm.
And once you learn more, you're able to pick and choose. Right. And so in that sense, like, yeah, I guess it is kind of dogmatic in that you're giving them more stuff to pick from. But I'd say that's better than just giving them like one viewpoint.
Right. And our society, like American society, it definitely has like a general philosophy, you know, in general, with things we can all like identify, like, oh, you should be kind to people, you know, and if you can, you know, and other things like that. Oh, like it's just law. Our laws basically are like the society's philosophy.
It's actually on this importanceofphilosophy.com. I'm not sponsored, I swear, but it is a good site. You should check it out. There's like basic rights that we've come up with as a society, and here's some of them: the right to life, the right to liberty, right to property, pursuit of happiness, free speech, and self-defense. And those are the rights we've determined are like the rights.
I think almost anyone would agree with any of those.
Yeah, unless I don't even know.
Except like I guess like
maybe free speech. There's some debate there.
Yeah, like Mao, like I don't want to say like antisocial, but like people who like I guess oppose like society or like order would disagree with
anarchists.
Yeah, anarchists might disagree with those.
Yeah, so that's we've determined that as a society is good stuff,
right? And I mean that basically is like a dogma that and even if it's like one we're like happy that we have now, like that we do agree with,
you should still think about it,
right? It's presented without much like alternative, which I'd always say like more information is better.
I think it's interesting. I just looked this up while you were talking. Don't worry, I was still paying attention. In all my biology classes, and a couple of them, they've taught creation theory and evolution. They're like, so here, like some people think like this is created, and I just looked up if that was required by law, and it's not. So I guess they're doing that just to like expose like more viewpoints and show like a certain viewpoint that they're obviously trying to like go towards.
Do you feel like they're presented equally?
I think in obviously like the class is focused on evolution, but in a way they're like, yeah, well, like creation had like it's just based on like a faith, right? Whereas evolution has evidence, and so you can choose like what you value more, because if you value faith over evidence, then I could like they're not stopping you from being like that, but like you need to know that for the test kind of thing,
right? Yeah, it's like
so I do think like they present both sides of the argument, and they'll go into like some people are like, how could an eye be created, because that's such a complex structure that like it couldn't have been created, right? And then they'll go in and like say exactly like here's why kind of thing. So I do think they show like both sides and the main criticisms of both and like explain them. But it just comes down to, do you value faith over evidence, I'd say.
What would you say are the main valid criticisms against like teaching philosophy more, or like having more of an emphasis on philosophy?
I think it breeds a more invested public.
a rowdier.
Yeah,
Citizenship.
the only thing it's like people would care more about their lives, and that's bad for people in charge. Is
agree.
what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like, I don't know, you're teaching dogma, but that is also like just a criticism of like, well, we want them to know our stuff, so you can't teach them your stuff.
Right, that's already happening. It might as well be more like diverse.
Yeah, so like that's not a very valid criticism. But
Yeah, I would say like any form of teaching, like by definition, has some like aspect of dogma.
oh yeah,
You know, until
I
we
mean-
can get to the point where people just like
mind upload.
right.
I mean, in Texas, in the Texas school system, my cousin, she works there, and she's a math teacher. But you have to learn, like, the history of Texas to be able to teach there. Just because, like,
They care about
that's what they care about. Is, like, you need to know that Texas is the best.
The Lone Star State.
And she's like, but I'm a math teacher. But, yeah, so, like, obviously there's, I mean, there's obviously just, no, I don't think there's any valid criticism to it.
Would you say, just kind of like a tangent off of that,
Yeah.
is math a philosophy?
Ooh,
Is,
interesting.
Is physics a philosophy? Because you
man.
could argue that math, it doesn't rely on like that question of like, can you have an independent thought? Like
Yeah.
the whole field of math is self-contained, right? Like it's just, it like self-justifies itself.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't rely on any other thing. It's a purely abstract idea, in theory. Because even though like numbers
Yeah,
represent,
but we as a conscious being have to exist to like be able to interpret math. But we do think it's universal. So maybe
But-
it's consciousness.
so you don't think computers interpret math?
Oh my god. this is the real deal here. We're getting into some unplanned stuff. Man, I'd say time. Time is the only thing that's completely unbiased.
Okay, I agree with that because we could meet another form of life that has something you could say is like their math, but could be fundamentally different from ours, possibly. No evidence, but I could see it happening.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if that did happen because I do think math is universal and physics I think is universal. Like if we understand it to a point where like, you know, we understand what happens in a black hole. Because like, what if a civilization is in a black hole? We're like, what? Like that would be a totally different physics, right? But I think time in our universe is the one thing that's completely independent of thought.
What about energy?
Energy?
I guess like space-time,
Yeah, those are
that's kind of all like linked together.
entangled.
Yeah, it's all the same thing.
Yeah, math it's an interesting one because like the concept of zero, right? I think that's a human concept.
Right, because that's not based off anything observable.
That's the absence of something.
Right. And, you know, we used to think like space is a vacuum. So that maybe could be like an observable
Zero.
example of zero. But the more we learn, it seems like it's actually not a vacuum. We just can't see the things in it.
It's a field.
Yeah, it's a field. Dark energy.
Dark energy's everywhere. We don't even know what it is.
Right. So maybe zero. Zero's like a shadow, you know, like a shadow is the absence of like light. You know?
Yeah. It's still a very human concept.
I agree.
It almost implies like an understanding of death, right? Like,
Right. You can imagine like non-existence.
yeah, because death is like seeing like, oh, there used to be some animated thing there, and now it's gone. Like, what happened?
Now it's a
Now it's a zero.
Yeah, that's interesting because if you look at the history of math, zero took a very, very long time
Yeah, to come about.
from like other like, you know, advanced air quotes like mathematical ideas. Zero still took a long time after those came around for like it to exist because it was so abstract.
Yeah, and it opens a lot of doors too. Like zero factorial. Do you know what that is?
Or like imaginary numbers.
Oh yeah, well that's totally like abstract.
Yeah.
Those aren't even real.
That's like if zero's like perfectly abstract, So if it's like an axis where 0, abstract,
Yeah.
real numbers, like to the right of abstract. Imaginary numbers are like to the left. They're like going out of their way to be abstract, you know?
Yeah, imaginary numbers, like the math doesn't even work.
Right.
We only use imaginary numbers because it's good for electrophysics,
Yeah. Taking like
electrical engineering.
a negative radical.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And I guess negative numbers also aren't real, right? That just represents like a bigger absence.
It's like a loss of something.
Yeah.
So that I can see, like, because even though we don't say it, it's like, oh, like I have 2 cows and I give you 2. That's subtracting, but it's also adding -2.
True.
So those ones are.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the same.
Yeah. Subtraction isn't real, guys. It's just adding negative numbers.
It's true. but
That, yeah. I forget.
I read a quote. Let me just.
Okay.
It was pretty interesting. It was about this mathematician who I forget who, but someone was like, I think 3 is the most interesting number because or 2 is the most interesting number, or no, yeah, 3 is 3. Just let me get my quote straight here. Because we have 1, and that's pretty logical. It's like, oh, I'm myself, right? And then we have 0, which is like, okay, now there's nothing. Then we have 2, where it's like, oh, now there's 2 people.
Or like there's like more than one.
Yeah, there's
many.
more than 1. And then we do 3, which is just there to continue it on. Like,
Right.
there's no logical. Like,
Right. That is, yeah. Any number after 2 is like pretty arbitrary. If you view the universe as like you and other things.
Yeah.
2 basically. I mean that's you and the universe, right? 3, that's just like
3 is dividing
that's
the
just
universe
like a
up.
more specific 2.
It's crazy.
That is interesting.
I thought that was a good quote.
Yeah. But yeah, I think philosophers who often struggled with where mathematics fits, because Rene Descartes, that famous French philosopher who we all know, he had an interesting idea, which was controversial then and is still now, that there was like inherent ideas that weren't based off any other ideas that like you could come up with on your own, like in the void. And he thought math was one of those inherent ideas.
I do too. I think, you know what? I think math
On
is
record?
I'm on record as saying
All
it. I'd already come to that conclusion. But it is tricky to like reconcile that, right? But I think if you're aware of yourself, then you can be aware of like something outside of you.
Or like the possibility of it.
Yeah. Which is weird, but hey, stranger things have happened. Right? Man, that was a good question. I like that.
Math's weird.
Math's weird. Physics. Is physics real? Well, we're just like interpreting like physical laws, so
Right. It could be. We could just be seeing patterns that aren't there. As shocking as that sounds,
you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
That's the root of philosophy, right? Just keep it in mind. Not saying you agree with it, but just keep it in mind.
Yeah. Try to keep as much in mind as you possibly can.
Yeah, and just be open-minded, really, as the moral of the story. Because you may, like, as Voltaire said, right? I can disagree with you vehemently, but I'll defend your right to speech with my life. Because that's, like, that's really important, right? Like, you don't have to agree with people to, like, see that they're people, right?
Right. And that their beliefs are probably built
just as valid.
Yeah.
Even though they may seem like crazy to you, most people have like some rational like understanding or like reasoning for their beliefs.
They've just had different life experiences.
Yeah. And who's to say their life is less valuable than yours?
It's true. Everyone's ignorant and stupid, right? We don't
in the beginning.
Yeah. No one has like perfect perspective.
Yeah.
So you always have to
I know.
You always have to be willing to entertain that you could be wrong. Because you probably are. We all are. But you can be less wrong.
Yeah.
Or
so
less confident about it.
I think we're going to have to wrap up the show here.
Math took up too much time, as always.
But I hope you guys enjoyed that little philosophy chat we had here. Emma's going to be back next week, so we'll get the full crew again.
Do we know what we're talking about yet? I think we've had a few ideas.
Yeah, well, let's not say.
Okay.
But if you guys out there have any ideas, send them along. I'd love to hear them. You know, you're a part of this show as much as we are.
We'll entertain your ideas.
Yeah, we'll discuss them, and maybe one week when we have so many fans, we can do a fan request episode where we like take everyone's request and just talk about them for a little bit. So that's a possibility. If you guys out there, you avid listeners,
You fifth stagers.
fifth stage, we need a better nickname. Come up with a nickname too. You guys are our interns also. But I hope you enjoyed that. Have a great weekend and keep philosophy in mind.
Yeah. Just look around for it.
Look around for it because it's already inside you.
Don't fight it.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and we're gonna leave now. So, Ben, do you have any parting words?
Don't be afraid.
There you have it. Don't be afraid. See you guys.
Got me all fired up to go far away. And it makes me to drink from the sound of my singing, baby. And it got me all fired up to go far away. And it makes me to drink from the sound of my singing, baby. So I left my home and all I had. I used to be good, but now I'm bad. So trust me, I'm as live as it gets. It's like, come on, y'all, get live, get down.